So what I wanted to talk about today is the new 4.5-inch brass chassis that I developed. I spent about a year on this altogether to bring it to manufacturing. Did that with the help of a fellow racer and a very good friend of mine who is in the manufacturing business. So I've raced for more than 20 years and took a hiatus before retiring. And when I came back to racing, found out, the favorite brass chassis of everybody's no longer produced, not available. And there had been a couple of other attempts, and they came and they went. I don't know why, possibly because of the amount of time and money that you have to spend to do something like this. But I really like it, and I like the hobby, so thought I'd give it a try, and this is what I came up with. So we did 3 prototype versions before we came up with the final version, which is this right here, and it will be a replacement for what we used to race. So some of the items on the chassis are in comparison to the old one that we used to race, which weighed 77.7 grams. The one that I produced weighs 95.8. That's a total of 18.1 grams heavier, which means the weight is built into the chassis. So at 18 grams heavier, even if you were to take this chassis and do nothing to it, compare it to the old one, I know when you race, you put this on your chassis. Everybody does. So this is one piece. You can see it's not the super thick stuff. It's the middle. That's 18 grams. Or you got the little bit thicker stuff, and that's 18 grams, those pieces. So that's nothing. Now, if you take the knockouts out of the chassis, they weigh 1.9 grams each, approximately. So if you take them all out, that's 15.2. So that makes this chassis 2.9 grams heavier than the previous one that we used to race, which would equal about 1.5 of these. That's nothing. Handling characteristics of this are just unbelievable. It just stays in the groove, and I know some of you guys like a car that's a little squirrely, so you can just start in the back and start popping them out. If you're going to race oval, you can leave them all in one side, take them all out of the other side. Body mounts are attached because it's part of the process of cutting out the chassis before it's formed. So you just cut right there and cut right there, clean it up a little bit, set it in on the 2 inner grooves, tap it in with a jeweler's handle, and it's tight enough to stay in there without any solder, but probably wouldn't be a bad idea to do that. If you run it on the outermost setting here, you have to solder it on for sure, and then that would be for vacuform bodies. The inner 2 are for plastic models like the cars that you see in the background. So some of the nice features that I think that were brought into this is the front end is slightly wider. It has a completely different guide tang, and it is way stronger. And at the end of our testing, we ran them all into the wall on the King track on the lower straightaway, full blast, and you could still put it back on and drive it. The right front wheel, which is what hit first, you might get a credit card underneath it, but it wouldn't take you out of the race. You could keep driving. Enlarged motor hole gets more air to the motor, keeps it cooler. Also, I'll show you on some of these built cars that were tested why that's better. Motor mount is also the same thickness and stronger. And then the rear holes, we did them very tight so you could press your oil lights in, and probably again could get away without soldering. So some of that stuff I took into consideration for somebody who's just getting into racing that doesn't know all the little tricks, like reaming this out and leveling it to the chassis platform, making it exactly perfect or zero, and things like that. But anyway, I really wanted to make the best product I could. I hope if you buy one of these, you'll give some sort of critique of it. Everybody that has in my area been able to get these, because they have been available to our local market for the last couple of months. Feedback is good. It's very versatile, and like I said, if you drive it, I think you'll like it. All you'll have to do is figure out what you want to do to it to make it the way you want it to be. So with that said, the first prototype, we only did 4 knockouts, but when we took the weights out, and then you can see we took them out and put them back in, I didn't like it. It was a little squirrely. So we came up with the idea that we would just change it and, make it so you had more adjustability to it. So you can see this one here, the uprights are on. It's on the innermost for a narrow body width-wise. And the front end on this, this is one of the first cars that we did and tested. You can see you just put your oil lights in there, set your height, and just, tack it in there. It's very strong because of the thickness, so I didn't reinforce it in any way. And this is the crashed car, by the way, that we gave it a little twist with our hand. And you can see, you can basically keep racing. Maybe not even use any pliers or anything, like we used to have your pliers in your back pocket if you got walled. It's really a very strong chassis to race. And then, here's a couple that have bodies on them. And you can see I leave mine loose, but, that's like the second version. And we got the times on the bottom. And, of course, we originally tried doing this type of engraving, but it rubs off, so not very good. This car here is set up with a small can motor. And the other thing with the larger hole on the bottom, which is something that I used to do to my chassis, is cut that open, is I hate soldering on the side of the motor. It's not bad the first time, but after that, removing it and then trying to get your motor back level, it's really hard because you got all that junk in there and you can't get it out. The way that you can solder the motor in is you can just right there, you put a little tack, and right there, and then when you want to release the motor, you just heat that up and it pops right out. So you don't have all that junk blobbed up. Plus, that also adds weight above the top center of gravity of the chassis. Also, you can see on the body mounts, all I do is I put a little touch of solder. I don't know if that'll show, but a little touch of solder right here on the inside. That's it, just to make sure it stays in there. And on this one, I experimented with throwing a tube in there. It's either 532 or 732. The bushing actually fits right in it. So if you put the bushing in and you tack it once you set your height, you can cut this piece and kind of snap it in there and then solder it. Makes it a little beefier. It doesn't change the handling or anything, and it doesn't add much weight. So I guess, depending on what your thoughts are when you race, if you're worried about crashing and not being able to stay in the race, that's, another idea that you can do on there. So anyway, I suppose if you buy one of these and you like it, we'll hear about it. And if you don't, I'm sure we will too. Hoping that you will give it a try and give some feedback on it. And thanks for listening.